Happy Saturday, happy 2 days before Christmas, and welcome to episode 34 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. If you're joining me on the YouTube channel, please, if you haven't already, don't forget to click like, smash that subscriber bell, or if you're joining me for the audio version of the podcast on Spotify, iTunes, and the other platforms, if you enjoy the content, please click like and subscribe. So we're going to shift gears yet again and talk about another one of my favorite documentaries, one that's kind of under the radar, and I don't know why, because it made a big splash back in the day, and it has a great title. It's a great title. The documentary, it's from 1997, is called Hands on a Hardbody. And I remember when I first read about the documentary in one of Roger Ebert's old movie home companion books, I just assumed that it was something dirty or something sexual, hands on a hard body. And then when I actually got around to reading Roger's review, I realized that, okay, this is a literal title. It's about an endurance contest in Longview, Texas, that was run every year, where competitors, I think it was 24, they would have 24, some people who had placed high in previous years, and the goal was to keep your hands on a hard-body Nissan truck. The last person to have their hand on the truck wins the truck. Hands on a hard-body. And there were endurance contests. They unfortunately became popular during the Great Depression. There's a famous movie, an incredibly brutal and depressing film from the 60s with Michael Sarrazin and Jane Fonda, among others. Gig Young was in it. They Shoot Horses, Don't They? A very weird title for a movie about a dance marathon. But Hands on a Hardbody is set during the 1995 Hands on a Hardbody contest at the Longview, Texas Nissan dealership. And the movie is funny and somewhat tragic, and it's just, you have to see it to believe it. And I don't know that words can really do it justice, because it's such a, at least now, maybe back then it wasn't so preposterous, but the idea of this, where you have these people with their hands on the truck, and you're allowed to take your hand off the truck for 5 minutes every hour and for 15 minutes every 6 hours. And that's it. As time goes on, people literally fall asleep at the switch. People cramp up and curl into a fetal position. There's so many different ways that you can be eliminated. One woman gets eliminated because she's changing her cassette player, and she absentmindedly, she thought she had one hand on the thing and she moved her hand to change the cassette. Sayonara, see ya, wouldn't want to be ya, as Wesley Snipes would say. But the movie, it is very moving and surprisingly gripping. Because even though these people, and it's a sort of a motley crew of a few people who have won this contest in the past, and then you say to yourself, well, that seems a bit unfair. There's one guy in there who has already won it and placed highly another time. It seems like the fix is in, wink, wink. But you don't know any of these people, but there are young people, there are old people, there are individuals who seem to have money and individuals who are dead broke. Then there are those that are just doing it for fun, and hey, maybe I'll win a truck. I mean, who wouldn't want to win a truck? And then there are people whose businesses in real life, this truck would make their business better. One of the guys says, I have 2 trucks, and if I get a 3rd truck, I mean, a truck is money. Think about what I can tote. I'm in construction, whatever it is. And you meet all of these people, and the contest goes and goes and goes, and then people drop off every hour, every 2 hours, and it gets pretty grim, and you start wondering, is somebody going to die? Is somebody going to literally keel over from a heart attack or a stroke? It didn't help that Longview, Texas, it was pretty hot there. Like, I feel like that was part of the idea of the contest. We're going to have it in the heat of summer, so it's not going to be, you know, 50 degrees and everybody's having a nice old time with birds flying around chirping. It's brutally hot on top of everything else. So you watch the movie, you become absorbed into the story. You can't believe what you're seeing. It's pretty ghastly that this was even done, that they thought this was a good idea. But we're with the story. And again, I'm not going to tell you who wins because honestly, I don't remember the name of the winner. But I know that the 1995 version of the Hands on a Hardbody contest in Longview, Texas ran for more than 6 days. No. I didn't say that right. It was more than 3 days. I believe the final tally was 77 hours. So more than 3 full days of the specifications that I just mentioned as far as the breaks and, you know, 15 minutes here and 5 minutes there. And it is, you don't really know who's going to win. Everybody seems like they're fucked at various points. And then there is, as I say, some people who just lose their minds. You lose a contest when you lose your mind. I think that was one of the taglines for the promotion. So the film was edited, and it ended up being released in 1997. It was not nominated for Best Documentary that year, but it won a lot of audience awards across the country. It is a crowd-pleasing kind of documentary, even though it doesn't seem like it would be. And at the end of the documentary, if you stick around to watch the credits, there's a little note that says, and a special thanks to Matthew McConaughey. And Matthew McConaughey spent a significant portion of his younger life in Longview, Texas. Now, there's no record or nobody came forward, and certainly Mr. McConaughey himself has not said anything about this. But because he was from the town, and I feel like someone in his family bought a Nissan from this dealership. I mean, for all I knew, he grew up a half mile away from this particular dealership. S.R. Bindler, the filmmaker, and some of the production team, my guess is they reached out to McConaughey, who, while they were finishing the film, A Time to Kill, which was his first like big break where you said, okay, this guy's a superstar in waiting, had come out and he had some money. And I've been led to believe by what I've read, although nobody actually gives a number, McConaughey gave enough money for the filmmakers to actually complete the film and then, you know, screen it. So it could have been 20,000 or 30,000, but it's not by accident that they thank him. He definitely helped this production along. So the film did really well on the festival circuit. It took a ton of, as I say, audience awards, best documentary at this film festival, and then another one, most inspirational, whatever it is. And the film was released to VHS and certain pressings. Now, I've never seen it on TV. I've never had it or seen it aired on television. My first exposure to it, as I say, was reading Roger Ebert's review, being flabbergasted, first off, that they did this? This is real? And then I found out about They Shoot Horses, Don't They? Which I couldn't believe that stuff like this was really done. I rented the VHS tape from, well, I was in Huntington. I didn't actually rent it from Huntington Public Library. I did one of those transfers where they shipped it in from like Center Moriches Library. There was one copy of the VHS tape of Hands on a Hardbody in the entire Long Island library system. So it was not exactly a big seller. Think about how many libraries there are on Long Island. There's a lot. There's more than 100. And there was one copy. So I had it shipped, and I watched the movie, and I immediately, one of my favorite documentaries, you know, right up there with Thin Blue Line, which I moved actually, but right up there with the Thin Blue Line, and The Times of Harvey Milk, and Capturing the Freedmans, and Spellbound, Girl in the Picture, some of the other ones. This film is incredible. And so after it hit the festival circuit, after it was released to VHS, you couldn't really find it anywhere. There was no DVD pressing that I know of, and it was just one of those sort of hidden where some people know about it, but it's just not that easy to find. And Quentin Tarantino has actually talked about this movie a lot in numerous talk show appearances. One time, I believe it was with Conan, but he could have been with Kimmel. I'm not sure, but it was one of the late night talk shows, and he talked up this movie, and he says it's always one of my go-to recommendations. If people say, "Hey, I want a documentary, but nothing too heavy. What do you think?" And he always says, "Hands on a Hardbody." So there was talk in the mid-2000s that a filmmaker that, just as a fan, I have a kind of an up and down relationship with, Robert Altman. Now, there are people who would rank Robert Altman among the greatest American filmmakers who have ever lived. There are those that would rank him above Clint Eastwood. Then there are those who would put him almost on par with, William Wyler's and guys of that, John Ford, Howard Hawks, maybe even throw him in there with Spielberg. I don't have him on that exalted perch. Altman to me is very hit and miss. So David Lynch to me is also hit and miss, but Blue Velvet is so spectacular that you can put him with any one of those other guys in terms of filmmaking talent and craft. Now, Altman has the craft. I really like the movie The Player. Well, I like it until about the last 20 minutes, and then it falls apart. I think Shortcuts is an absolute masterpiece. Shortcuts is the only Robert Altman film I can unabashedly say that I love. He did Nashville, McCabe and Mrs. Miller. He did a lot of real gritty Americana type films. If you want to Google him. Did a couple of comedies here and there, but he is I should say, very well respected within the film industry. And I certainly respected him, even if I thought, Ready to Wear wasn't that good. That was a film that had a lot of Oscar buzz and it bombed. That was 1994, the year of Gump and Pulp Fiction and Shawshank. There was chatter in the mid-2000s. Robert Altman, who had an artificial heart, still seemed healthy, was planning to make a movie, an adaptation of the Hands on a Hardbody documentary. And they were already talking about Hilary Swank, who had just come off an Oscar for Boys Don't Cry. Excuse me. She'd just come off an Oscar for $1 Million Baby. Boys Don't Cry was her first Oscar. It's amazing to think that she won 2 Oscars and she still seems young. And this is she won Boys Don't Cry 20-some years ago and $1 Million Baby now 19 years ago. Crazy. But she was in talks for the lead. And I don't remember who else, but Robert Altman passed away. And it was the kind of niche project that only a Robert Altman, who was always interested in these kind of under-the-radar stories of Americana, he could make a conventional Hollywood film, but his instinct was not to make a conventional Hollywood film. It was to do something to swim upstream, if you will. So I remember when I read that Altman had passed, I remember thinking, they're not ever making this movie. Because as in the case, unfortunately, of AI, where Stanley Kubrick attempted to mount it for so many years and at different times, when Kubrick passed, Spielberg, who was always interested in the project, he took it. This particular story was probably just not big enough for the Spielbergs, as much as Spielberg respected, and all of the big filmmakers. I mean, Clint Eastwood would tell you, I love Robert Altman. There's actually a great moment at the 1993 Oscars when Clint Eastwood wins for Best Director. Altman was up for The Player, and there were some people that thought, maybe they kind of owe it to Altman too because of his career. But there was a nice moment where those two old greats, and Clint was in his 60s at the time, Altman older, but there was a genuine warmth and camaraderie in the way that the guys shook hands as Clint was on his way upstage. I mean, Altman was so gracious. He probably figured it was his last shot, but he was so gracious and so warm and gentlemanly in that moment that I gained, as if I need to have more respect, but totally did. So unfortunately, when Robert Altman passed, the idea of a film project died with him. And I was already a fan of the docu. I had seen it right around that time in the mid-2000s, and I was excited. I was like, oh, this is going to be terrific, because that, to me, was the kind of movie that I would like from a Robert Altman. Because, as I said, I put Shortcuts, it's not in my top 10 from the 90s, but Shortcuts is one of the best films of that decade in general. It is phenomenal. It's an ensemble film not like a Pulp Fiction, but it's a non-linear sort of narrative where different characters, their stories intersect and other characters don't. A little, again, like the Pulp Fiction. But it has an unbelievable all-star cast. From Frances McDormand, Tim Robbins, Fred Ward, Matthew Modine, Julianne Moore, so many, Robert Downey Jr., Chris Penn, the late Chris Penn, so many great actors. Jennifer Jason Leigh is a fucking riot in the movie. There are so many terrific actors in the film that just bounce in and out of the story. And every one of the stories, to me, works. And people at the time were going crazy because there's a scene where Julianne Moore is naked from the waist down while she's having an argument with her movie husband, Matthew Modine, a favorite of mine from Full Metal Jacket. And that got a lot of attention and a lot of buzz in the days where the internet was nothing like today. So if you're going to watch one Robert Altman film that doesn't have anything to do with the Hands on a Hardbody documentary, watch Shortcuts. It's very long, but it's an extraordinary film. But the film project, the Hollywood feature film with an independent style filmmaker in Robert Altman, was gone. Nobody took up the mantle. There was some hope, but it just didn't happen. In 2011, 2012, some people wrote music and prepared a musical for Broadway. And Hands on a Hardbody, the musical, hit Broadway. It didn't last very long. Again, it's such a niche sort of a story that even in musical form, unless the songs were out of this world, it was going to be very difficult for it to turn a profit, even at a time in 2013 where, Broadway was doing okay. So it got many award nominations. And then after it closed on Broadway, it appeared, on not second-run theaters, but, off-Broadway. And then it was translated into kind of a stage play, because the story is what the story is. It doesn't need a lot of locations because most of the documentary is this, literally is this, is I'm going to take my left hand to scratch my head, and then I'm going to scratch the right side. This is a lot. And then there's, of course, interviews with the people, the contestants, and people who drop out of the competition, and just what you would expect. But Keith Carradine was nominated for the kind of the main Tony Award for Best Actor, and didn't win. It didn't win any of those major awards. But, and of course, whenever I say major award, I think of The Old Man in A Christmas Story. It's a major award. So it didn't win any of the major either Drama Desk Awards or Tony Awards. But it was well received. It got mostly favorable reviews. Just not enough people saw it. And I think it only played, they had the previews, and I feel like it only played for about 6 weeks before, unfortunately, closing down. And then, it has appeared in a lot of different locations, as I say, since then, where you might be able to find it in a local repertory like our local theater company. But it is a great film. It is a classic. I hate to use this word in this way, but it's a classic story of Americana. It really is. And not a twisted Americana like Blue Velvet, where you have white picket fence and, fire trucks with a fireman waving at a little boy crossing the street, and then it turns out everything is fucked. Hands on a Hardbody is Americana. It is the heartland. It is Texas. It's so Texas. And I don't even mean that in a bad way. This is exactly the kind of thing that you would expect, where you have all of these different sorts of people, all walks of life, all stripes, all shapes and sizes, competing. And they're not, see, this is a thing the documentary really does well. It could easily be the kind of arch film where you're kind of almost condescending to the people in it. This does not do that. This takes them and this absurd situation seriously, because somebody's life is going to change. Somebody's going to win a $20-something thousand truck. And that's a lot of money. I don't care, 1995 or 2023. You win a brand new truck. That's serious business. And so that is the thing that the movie, I believe, does so well, is that, yes, you meet some people that are way out there, meth addicts, way out there. But They all have a story, and each of the people in this particular year's contest, they're all compelling stories and compelling characters, but real life people. So unfortunately, and this has nothing to do with the movie, but a number of years later, the last time that this particular dealership in Longview, Texas ran the Hands on a Hardbody contest, one of the contestants kind of lost his marbles and, from what I read, walked into a Walmart and shot and killed somebody. Don't know if he killed himself too, but there was definitely a death. Maybe it wasn't a Walmart, but after that, they very quietly discontinued the contest because, unfortunately, that sort of endurance and the kind of mind-numbing where you're just literally rocking back and forth, trying not to fall asleep, trying not to lose your marbles entirely. You know, it's almost like when people who had climbed Mount Everest and other high-altitude climbs, where even with supplemental oxygen, you start getting loopy. You start seeing shit that isn't there. You start having to talk yourself through normal person things. I need to keep my hand on the truck or I'm not going to win the truck. I have to stay awake. I have to stay, boom, done. You know, you lean into the truck for more than a couple of seconds, you're out, right? But it is extraordinary. I highly recommend it. And right now, it's not realistic to order the DVD because the DVD is out of print. And it's with the stuff that, of course, I'm trying to look up and prepare for this particular podcast. They're asking for like $100 for a used copy of the DVD. The only spot where the movie, the documentary, is available for streaming is Apple. And it's not streaming free to the best of my knowledge. You can purchase this movie on Apple. So, you know, you buy the stream so that you always digitally own a copy for $10. And I don't ever want to spend anyone's money. So if you still have physical media or capabilities for it, you can easily rent it the same way I did if you have a library card. They'll ship it to you anywhere in your system. I think almost every state does this now, where you say, hey, I live here, like I live in Coram, and there's a copy in the Huntington Library. Do I have to drive to Huntington? No, sir, just fill the request and we're going to ship it to your home library. You pick it up there. So yeah, if you can't find it online, and it's on YouTube, but in like a truncated format. If you actually want to see the full 97-minute film, which, as I say, you'll love it. You won't believe how much you enjoy this movie. You have to rent it right now or buy it on Apple. That's how you stream it. You know, you could do it right now. There is hope, and you look at various points. There have been times where it popped up on Amazon Prime, and then they pulled it. I don't know why, but it's worth seeing. It is a movie worth seeking out because it is so strange, and we're never going to see anything like that contest again. We're just not, because there is a potential for catastrophic end result of somebody losing their marbles and going on a shooting spree. And with that kind of grim note, even though the movie itself is not grim at all, it's kind of joyous, that brings to a close episode 34 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I want to thank you all for joining me once again. If you've watched the YouTube version of the podcast and you enjoyed the content and have enjoyed some of the other content, but have yet to click like and subscribe, please click the like button and smash that subscriber bell. Or if you like the audio versions of the podcast on Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, or Amazon Music, please don't forget to click like and subscribe. I will be back with episode 35 real soon. Take care.